Welcome to our discussion of AP Chemistry, Unit 4.5, Stoichiometry. For this topic, our enduring understanding is that when a substance changes into a new substance, or when its properties change, no mass is lost or gained. And our learning objective is going to be to explain changes in the amounts of reactants and products based on the balanced reaction equation for a chemical process. So let's dive right in. So stoichiometry describes conversions that involve mole ratios from balanced chemical equations. And that's key. Before you tackle anything using stoichiometry, you need to make sure that your reaction is balanced. So always double check to make sure that is the case. And here, as a refresher, here's your mole heart, right, with your mole ratio here to in the center here. So we're going from either mass or particles or moles of A, and that can either be a reactant or a product. And then we're going to convert to mass, moles, or particles of B, which can also be a reactant or a product. And the key to be able to go from one reactant to another reactant, or one product to another product, or between products and reactants is this mole ratio right here, also called the stoichiometric ratio, which is the ratio of moles in the problem. And the reason we can use this is that the ratio of moles in the problem matches the ratio in the balanced equation. So that stoichiometric ratio, that mole ratio, is the key to stoichiometry and being able to convert from one substance in a reaction to another substance in a reaction. So let's take a look at an example. There we go. So how many moles of sulfuric acid, H2SO4, are needed to react with 0.366 moles of NaOH by the following balanced chemical equation? So we know we're going from moles of A to moles of B, right? Because they asked us how many moles of sulfuric acid are needed to react with 0.366 moles of NaOH. So a good place to start is making sure we know where we're starting on our mole map or our mole heart and where we're going. And since we're just going from moles of sodium hydroxide to moles of sulfuric acid, this should be a one conversion factor step. So we should only be using one conversion factor in order to solve this problem, and that conversion factor is going to be our mole ratio. So to set this up, we're always going to start with what we've been given, and we've been given 0.366 moles of NaOH. So start with what you're given, so we put that there. And now I need my moles of NaOH to cancel, so that's going to go on the bottom, and I need to convert to my moles of sulfuric acid. So that's going to be what goes on the top. And since I'm going from moles to moles, this is my mole ratio. And these numbers, as you recall, are going to come from your balanced equation. So for every 1 mole of H2SO4, I need 2 moles of NaOH because I'm going to have 2 moles of NaOH reacting with 1 mole of H2SO4 to produce 1 mole of Na2SO4 and 2 moles of water. So this is our mole ratio for this conversion factor in order to go from sodium hydroxide to H2SO4. And then when we solve it, we get 0.183 moles of H2SO4 because my moles of NaOH are going to cancel. So the only units I have left are my moles of sulfuric acid, which is what I wanted to solve for. So we are good. Another important component of stoichiometry is being able to identify the limiting reactant. The limiting reactant is the reactant that produces the least amount of product, or it's the reactant that's going to run out first. Sometimes they will tell you that you have one reactant being reacted with an excess amount of the other reactants, in which case they've identified the limiting reactant for you. However, if they give you starting quantities for all of your reactants, you have to determine the limiting reactant first before you begin, so that you know how much product you're actually going to produce. So the excess reactant is the opposite of the limiting reactant. This is the reactant that remains in excess after the reaction has come to completion. So at the end of the reaction, as long as it's an irreversible reaction, you're going to have some excess reactant left, but all of your limiting reactant will have been used. And you will only ever produce as much product as is allowed by the limiting reactant. You're never going to get more because you're going to run out of that limiting reactant. So the limiting reactant must be determined in order to calculate the amount of product produced. And what you're actually calculating is the theoretical yield. There's an actual yield, which is what you produce in a lab setting, and then the theoretical yield, which is how much product you should be able to make based on the amount of limiting reactant. And the theoretical yield is what you calculate using stoichiometry. It's in a perfect world, mathematically, we should be able to produce X amount of product. We are likely not going to achieve that much, or we're probably not going to produce that much product in an actual lab setting. Our actual yield is going to be typically less than our theoretical yield. But the theoretical yield is what we calculate using stoichiometry, and the actual yield is what we produce in a lab setting. So again, be aware if they give you amounts of more than one reactant. That means it's on you to determine what the limiting reactant is, so you can determine the accurate quantities of product that you can expect to produce using the limiting reactant and correctly calculating your theoretical yield. So let's review the standard steps to determining limiting reactant and amount of product produced. And this is, I think, the longer way. I'll show you a shorter way a little bit later on. This is a little bit longer, but it's the one that's perhaps easier to remember because it's a little more straightforward. So first step, write a balanced equation, or double check to make sure that the equation you've been given is balanced. Next, choose one reactant or reagent and calculate the amount of one product produced. Doesn't matter which product you choose, but you have to use the same product for all of your reactant calculations. And then number 3, starting with the remaining reactant, calculate the amount of the same product used in step 2. And for 4, the reactant that produces the least amount of product is the limiting reactant and should be used to calculate the amount of all products produced. So again, you need to do this step for every reactant you have, and you're going to convert from each of your reactants to the same product to determine which of your reactants is going to produce the least amount of that reactant. And whichever one does is going to be your limiting reactant. And here's a couple other little things to keep in mind that I kind of already mentioned, but just to reiterate and put them in text here in the slide for you. So if you are just identifying the limiting reactant, you can convert to the number of moles of product produced. You don't need to go on and calculate for number of grams or molecules. You can just stop at moles if they're just asking you to identify. However, the question may ask you to eventually convert to grams or liters if you're using a gas, or molecules or atoms, in which case it may make sense for you to continue converting since you're going to have to eventually. But again, if you're just identifying, stop at moles, save yourself the trouble. But if the question asks you to eventually continue on and convert to a specific unit, then it might be worth your time to go that extra step earlier on in your work. And finally, again, as I mentioned, if there are multiple products, you can choose any that you like as long as the question doesn't specify. But always look at the question. If they're going to ask you to eventually calculate the grams of a certain product, then use that product from the beginning. It'll save you time and save you steps later on. And on the AP exam, you're going to be tight for time. So every little opportunity you have to save time is going to be a big bonus for you. So read the question carefully, see what they're eventually going to ask you to do. If they're going to ask you to solve for grams of a certain product, then you can go that extra step earlier on and only work with that specific product. So you don't have to go back and redo all of your calculations for a separate product. And again, a couple reminders for step 3 to reiterate. So it's crucial that the same product is used for each reactant to determine the limiting reactant, which I've already mentioned a couple times, but we'll mention it again to make sure that that point sinks in. And you must also convert to the same point for all reactants. So to determine your limiting reactant, you need to compare moles to moles or grams to grams or molecules to molecules. Whatever your stopping point is, it needs to be the same for all of your reactants using the same product. So you can compare apples to apples. You need the same quantities to be able to compare and correctly identify the limiting reactant. So if you converted from one reactant to moles of product, you must convert to moles of product for the other reactants. Hopefully that's pretty straightforward, but it's a crucial reminder. And if you forget, it will completely mess up your stoichiometry, and you may end up misidentifying the limiting reactant and setting your whole problem off because of an early mistake. So do make sure you're paying attention and being consistent in the early parts of your stoichiometry reactions and problems. So I'm not going to play this video for you within a video. That seems like a lot, and this is a longer video. But if you need your memory refreshed on limiting reactants and how they work and all the nitty-gritty ins and outs, I highly encourage you to go to the slides on the website, go to this topic, go to the slides, skip down to this video, watch it on double speed to just refresh your memory. So a good little refresher course for working with limiting reactants and calculating for them. So same here, I'm not going to play this video within a video, but this is a quicker, more advanced method that I highly encourage you to learn. So I very, very, very strongly recommend watching this video, adding the notes to your video, and practicing with this method. This one's shorter and faster, and it will work every time. I don't think it's quite as intuitive as the longer method. So if on a test you can't remember how to do this new, more advanced method, shorter method, skip it. Go with what you know works. Go with the more intuitive method. But if you use this method enough, and if you're good at working with ratios in your head, this may come pretty easily for you, and it will certainly save you time. So I cannot stress enough how strongly I recommend watching this video and figuring out how to do the more advanced, shorter version. Saving time on that AP exam is key. Every second counts. So if we can shave a few off using this more advanced method and using it reliably and being able to remember how to do it quickly and use it effectively, could certainly save you some valuable time. So definitely check this video out. It could really help shave some time off and help you use that time for other things on your AP exam. So watch this video. Finally, something that we often see paired with stoichiometry calculations is percent yield. So the theoretical yield, as we mentioned before, is how much product should be produced based on stoichiometric calculations. And this is how much product should be produced by the limiting reactant. So this can also be called the predicted value or the calculated mass. This is mathematically how much we should get in a perfect universe. The actual yield is the amount that we actually get in a non-perfect universe in a lab setting. So this can also be called the experimental yield or actual mass obtained. And then finally, our percent yield is a way to describe how close your actual yield was to your theoretical or your expected yield. And as I mentioned, typically your actual yield is going to be less than your theoretical yield. If your actual yield is more, check your theoretical yield calculations. Something might have gone awry there. So to calculate your percent yield, you're going to take your actual yield divided by your theoretical yield times 100. So let's wrap this discussion up with an I do practice. So what is the percent yield in the reaction between 46.1 grams of cesium and 13.4 grams of oxygen if 28.3 grams of cesium oxide is collected in the lab? So before I reveal the answer and go through this with you, pause the video, see if you can give it a try on your own, and then hit play to check your answer. Okay, so the first thing we need before we dive into this problem is a balanced reaction. So this is a reaction between cesium and oxygen gas. Remember don't forget about your Brinkelhoffs. And then when we balance this, we're going to get a 4:1:2 ratio. And if you notice, they gave us quantities for both of our reactants. So it's up to us to determine the limiting reactant. So using the longer method, I think the easier but longer method is we're going to start with what we're given for each of our reactants. So I'm going to start with 46.1 grams of cesium, and I only have one product. So I'm going to solve for my amount of product. Notice that I do go all the way to grams, and that's because I have to do percent yield. So I have a feeling I'm going to need to go to grams. And yep, because here they say 28.3 grams of cesium oxide is collected in the lab. If they just said moles of cesium oxide, then awesome, I could just stop at moles. But since I know I'm going to have to eventually solve for grams of cesium oxide produced in order to calculate my percent yield, I just decided to go all the way to grams for both of them. You could stop at moles for each, determine your limiting reactant, and then use moles of cesium oxide produced by your limiting reactant, and then just do one additional conversion factor to get to your grams. That would work too and might save you a couple seconds. But I just decided to go all the way to grams for both of them, and to kind of remind you of that whole conversion factor process from grams of reactant to grams of product. So start with what we're given, 46.1 grams of cesium. So I need to go from grams of cesium to moles of cesium, and then from moles of cesium to moles of cesium oxide using our mole ratio, right? Our 2-to-4 mole ratio. And then from moles of cesium oxide to grams of cesium oxide. So our 46.1 grams of cesium is going to produce 48.9 grams of cesium oxide. And next, for my oxygen, I need to do the same thing. And since I went to grams here, I need to go to grams for oxygen as well, so I can compare the same quantities. So 13.4 grams of oxygen, from grams of oxygen, moles of oxygen, moles of oxygen to moles of cesium oxide using our mole ratio, which is a 2-to-1 ratio. And then from moles of cesium oxide to grams of cesium oxide. So I get 236 grams of cesium oxide produced by my 13.4 grams of oxygen gas, which means that cesium is my limiting reactant. So this is going to be my theoretical yield. This is going to be what I'm actually going to produce. I'm never going to get to 236 grams of cesium oxide because I'm going to run out of cesium first. Once I produce 48.9 grams of cesium oxide, I'm out of cesium. So this is going to be my theoretical yield. So here's everything broken down. My limiting reactant, we've identified as cesium. Oxygen's my excess reactant. My theoretical yield is how much cesium oxide I produced using my cesium, so 48.9 grams. And my actual yield is what they gave me in the problem, 28.3 grams of cesium oxide, because that's what we collected in the lab. So we stick these numbers into our formula for percent yield. So our actual yield, 28.3, over our theoretical yield of 48.9 times 100, and we get a percent yield of 57.9%. So we made a bit over half of what we expected to make. Not a great ratio. So there's probably some error, something that happened in the lab to cause our percent yields to be fairly low for what we expected. And that wraps up our discussion of 4.5. I highly recommend giving this problem a try using the new, faster method and see if you get the same results. So make sure to go back, watch that video, take some notes on the quick method, the more advanced method, and try it with your I do practice and see if you get the same results. And that's it for 4.5. Bring any questions you have with you to class.